At Imaginatik. It's my pleasure to bring today's broadcast to you. Before we get started, for those of you that are new to our series, a couple of reminders. The slides and the recording from today's presentation will be available afterwards, so stay tuned for an email follow-up tomorrow on that. In addition, we really encourage question and answer and a robust dialogue in all of these broadcasts. So as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, please at any moment type them into the questions part of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll answer them as soon as we can to stimulate dialogue. With that, I'm going to kick things off. I'm the head of marketing at Imaginatik with a little bit about why we do this Innovation Master Series and what it's supposed to be about. Innovation is a new discipline, as most of you on the line know, and a lot of the best practices are still being written, and those ways for everyone to come together as peers to talk about how to manage and lead innovation, how to make it work inside an organization, are still a bit few and far between. And so this is meant to be a place where we can foster that dialogue. Some background context, as we are all aware, we live in a very different world than we used to, which changes rapidly, seemingly every day, and where even whole industries can be disrupted within a matter of months or years rather than decades. So this leads to some very interesting trends out there in the world. We last week released the Imaginatik's State of Global Innovation Survey Report for 2013, and the data said some things really backing up the fact that we live in a different world. And one of them is that innovation is now part of the mainstream agenda of companies out there in the world, 92% of which have innovation on the top-level management agenda, and almost 2/3 of which have been doing so for more than 2 years, which is quite striking. In particular, with this fast-paced change and the way in which innovation gets attached to it, it's pretty clear that leadership of innovation, that someone carrying the torch and making sure that your company becomes truly innovative, is also important. The fact that almost half of our sample said that they have a chief innovation officer who is helping to drive the innovation agenda at their company. Yet for those of you who are innovation leaders or even chief innovation officers, you know that it's not an easy job at all, and that you get all kinds of pressure and fire from different directions, one of them being, of course, from above, where leadership often knows that innovation is important, but may not know exactly what that means. And so you're both being asked to describe and define your job at the same time that you're being asked for results, often very quickly. At the same time, as many of you know, there's often organizational resistance to doing new things that could be a threat to many kinds of vested interests throughout the enterprise, and here are just a few examples of those. And so certainly it's not an easy job, and there's even a question of, will innovation ever become truly sustainable in the modern enterprise? And this came through in our recent survey a lot as well, where many people were saying that actually getting to tangible results is still a major problem in many cases. So it's a complicated environment. Hopefully these Innovation Masters Series webinars will continue to be useful for all of you in making sense out of how to really succeed. To that end, I'd like to welcome in Luis Solis, who is our President of North America. We have a special topic today. This comes from a keynote presentation last week at the world's first Chief Innovation Officer Summit in New York City, where Luis talked about the career path and future role of the innovation leader in the enterprise in this mixed environment. And it was so well received that we thought a broadcast to everyone that couldn't make last week's conference would be very useful. Luis has long experience in innovation and enterprise change throughout his career, and you should all stay tuned for his upcoming book, which goes into a lot more detail than today's presentation can about the full richness of these issues. So without further ado, Luis, let me hand you over screen sharing controls, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. Let me ensure we get this all set up, show my screen. happy to see so many folks that we know online and many, many new attendees to the Innovation Series. It continues to be a great source of content for all practitioners, and please do go on to the Imaginatik web channel, YouTube channel, to learn more. I am hoping that today's messages will lead you to enter questions in the chat area. And it's in the bottom of your control panel. You can actually type a message to the entire audience. I suppose you could type it just to me if you really dislike what you're seeing, and or to Chris, and you could tell him that you like his part. He loves compliments, and that's good. Please do put the questions in. We're going to stop several times to try to instigate you to ask questions if you haven't yet. So this phenomenon of the Chief Innovation Officer, what is it all about, and how real is it, and how sticky will it be? I actually met a fellow at United Technologies who claims that his bit of fame is he was the first ever Chief Innovation Officer in 1993. Who knows if it's not true? It's a great story, but it was properly coined in 1998 in Mr. Miller's book, The Fourth Generation of R&D, and that is now a treatise that really looks at new practices for R&D. And as we know, innovation now is beyond R&D. It's not just R&D, it's culture. It is a range of other activities, even the organization design, scouting, inside the organization, outside the organization. So it's gone beyond R&D. Our guesstimate today is that there's about 500 CINOs with a title such as a CINO worldwide, and increasingly, many of you will notice, they're in non-traditional areas. Hospital chains have CINOs. Cities and state. I mean, Colorado has a Chief Innovation Officer, and some cities have a Chief Innovation Officer. So it's a fast-growing role. It's a great place for all of us to be. Portends good career progression. However, some of the big questions still remain, which is, what is its future, and how might each of you on this line, and those are the people who are CINOs, fortify the future and make it an area, a function of the business that's around 3, 5, 10 years from now. Charles Darwin, the most common phrase associated with Charles Darwin, it's sort of a crowd phrase, a little bit more what the crowd thinks is survival of the fittest. And those of you on the line who are biologists are saying, you know, harump, that's just not true. What he said was actually something rather different that has a lot more to do with adaptability to the rate of change and the direction of change than it does about being the fittest. So in fact, if you're a biologist, you tear apart that first phrase and say, all species are fit. That's not the issue. The issue is, can the species survive all the change and adapt? And that's what we're going to talk about today is, can the species of the CINO as a new function and role really take advantage of the environment, take advantage of the opportunities for leadership and leadership fortification to be around 3, 5, 10 years from now. I'm going to give an example of a position or two that no longer are, that were pretty much in the same position maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago. Just very quickly, what does it mean to adapt ecologically? This little tree frog from South America has suction cups on its fingers and around its mouth, where it can literally sit at the bottom of a stream, very fast stream, where fish and other predators can't, and it can feed and feast from the bottom of the stream without being intercepted or caught. And likewise, you take a common, somewhat common species like a shark that develops the ability to walk. This is a walking shark from Indonesia, and the reason it walks is that it tends to live in rather shallow waters that have coral, and if you try to swim through coral as a person, you can imagine how painful it is for us or a shark. So it actually walks across the corals to feast on shrimp and other types of delicious nutrients at the bottom of the sea or in shallow waters. The question that arises then is, with all the conditions that we see for innovation, Chris showed some data. It's much more important. It's a CEO agenda. There's conferences, there's tools, there's strategy consultants. Many of you are on this line right now. Does the future look this bright? Or, as we will surmise, are we really facing a possible extinction scenario for some very specific reasons? We actually think it's possible that without careful attention, and there's already been many cases of it, we have several clients that once had innovation departments and today do not. This is in the last 5 years, where for a number of reasons, they're no longer funded and staffed. I ran into one of those people from an insurance company last week, and we were marveling at the fantastic work the firm did while the team was there, and it no longer exists for reasons we're going to cover in a moment. So let's talk about this premature extinction stuff. Those of you on the line who are innovation executives, as you look at this page, you're going to say, these are some of the reasons why I'm here. Whether you're a chief innovation officer, VP of innovation, director, an advisor, it could be because you're a disruptor or you're a technologist bringing brand new technology to product lines or offerings. You're changing the culture. You can read these. And these are, I think, kind of the stories we tell ourselves about why we're hired, about why we've gotten these positions. The truth is, underneath all this are some very serious nagging questions about why you. Because in most cases, there was someone before you. You might be the second, third, or fourth person leading innovation. What happened to those other people? In other cases, you're there because the executive committee couldn't align on a definition of innovation, a strategy, or a direction, so they brought someone else to you to try to do it. They couldn't do it. In a third case, the CEO has underfunded or underinvested or undersupported innovation and is sort of throwing her arms up or his arms saying, we just need someone to come in here and champion this cause. And it goes on. And even the most pessimistic cases, you've been brought in for as long as the company tries to dabble in the new, as opposed to the here and now, the new things, until such time as it reverts to the status quo, in which case you won't be there. You'll go on to your next job because the company's no longer innovating and going forward. So what's an example of this happening where you think you have a very high value-adding, relevant purpose for the position, but there's some underlying troubling trends that might portend extinction of the species of CINO? And one example is the Chief Knowledge Officer. Where is the Chief Knowledge Officer today? By LinkedIn analysis, and it's not perfect, there's only about 120 Chief Knowledge Officers in large organizations today who are labeled as such. There's other people in charge of knowledge management. But the CKO, for those of you who can remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, mid-90s, the Chief Knowledge Officer was a big deal. I mean, they were on org charts. They were going to be the next major function of the organization. And you ought to ask yourself, what happened to Chief Knowledge Officer? Why are they not here today? What conditions were they not able to navigate to remain relevant at the level of the executive committee or the C-levels to get funded? On the other hand, take a look at Vivek, who at one point was Chief Information Officer of the United States, and now does a variety of other things in affiliation with Harvard. He also previously was the Information Officer for Washington, D.C. If we look at the growing body of Chief Information Officers, as opposed to CKOs, they become a permanent part of the corporate organizational fabric. I think in most cases, most organizations not only have a CIO, those organizations are funded. They seem to have a good trajectory for sustenance and career levels, and in many cases, as we'll mention in a moment, many of them are trying to seize the innovation agenda, at least in part. They're saying, hey, innovation is about social business technology. Innovation is about collaboration. Innovation is about tools and enterprise templates. We can do all of that. You don't need a Chief Innovation Officer. You don't need a separate department. So this is a very interesting trend. You have one that back in the day could have been really significant. It is gone, and pieces and parts of all of the Chief Knowledge Officer's work are now elsewhere. And then you have the Chief Information Officer, which is here to stay. So what are the patterns of extinction? And I've hinted at these. And by the way, some of what I'm discussing is very relevant for all of your careers, all of our careers. It's not just CINOs, but it certainly applies to the CINO species. First, you have to be able to survive changing conditions. It's pretty obvious, right, when you think about it. And then the second one is you've got to be able to fend off stronger competition. This is what permits a species to live and go on. Now, by the way, those of you who are either students of this kind of work or biologists know that 99.9% of all species since the dawn of time are now extinct. Only a small fraction remain. So it's not surprising that maybe the CINO will be converted into, the roles will be back into product management, or will be diffused into strategy or organization over time. There will be no CINO or special innovation function. Or maybe there can be. We certainly have a reason to believe that by taking matters into your hand, this can be a long-term career and function and a new way of looking at large organizations. I'm going to give you a little story. I could play a different one. There's 3 or 4 that we've been involved in as Imaginatik, as advisors to CEOs and executive committees. And this is just in the last year. In the last year, one very large mining multinational whose purpose, the niche they were fulfilling in the overall sort of mining ecology, was to produce their products at a lower cost, building in technologies, changing their business models, looked very bright. 4 years ago, staffed up a team of almost over 20 people in innovation worldwide. And what happens? Changing conditions, plummeting end prices for this particular mineral product. At the same time, there were scaling cost inputs. Probably the most important change, though, and many of you on this line know the feeling, know the issue, is this new CEO and team was brought in to turn around this very large company. And they came in and said, why is so much energy being spent on Horizon 2 and 3 stuff around here? Shouldn't we really be innovating at the operating level in the field? Why do we need this whole group? At the same time, and that's the big rate of change, right? At the same time, the competition was from operations. They were saying, look, we make all the money. We don't quite know why we're funding innovation. We've invested $40 million in new technologies and products. We're not going to know for 5 years if it pays off. Let's just go back to basics. Well, if you look at the 4th bullet, you can figure out who won out. So the competition was operations. The changing conditions were serious macroeconomic issues plus a change in management. The outcome? 13 full-time employees were all released on one day this year, and there were 14 part-time also. A total of 27 innovators are no longer with this company, and innovation was sort of woven back into operations in the field at more of an incremental level. By the way, this story repeats itself. I don't want to mention company names. We work with 3 or 4 others who've gone through the exact same cycle. And what we believe strongly is they did not heed some very critical rules around understanding how to create species survival. So first off, some of the red flags to watch out, to fortify yourself on is if new things, new offerings, new products, not just breakthrough, but new in general, and I see some dear friends on the line who absolutely probably are feeling cringes at seeing this because you may know exactly what I mean here. If there's an undervaluation of the new versus execute better on what I do today, it's a major factor as a red flag. Changing conditions, shorten horizons. If all of a sudden the horizon for success goes from 2 and 3 years down to quarters or 1 year, or there is corporate reorganization, or for whatever reason, due to unrelated litigation, there's an increase in the fear of failure. I think at that point, for sure, you have other factors that could suggest sort of CINO or innovation team department risk. And obviously, competition. We think there's 2 major competitors in the sort of corporate ecology, gunning for the innovation role. One is the chief digital officer, and anybody in charge of digital, social digital, and the second one is the chief information officer. Both of those departments have great appetite, great interest in owning that budget, owning the top talent, recruiting it, and yet, candidly, positioning for the executive committee and the CEO that they're the right people to be doing it. And again, I think many of you know of your clients or your friends or your own companies where innovation reports to the CIO and looks kind of different than when it reports to the CEO or when it reports to marketing or digital. So I'm going to stop there. I want to ask you and implore you to begin to type a few questions in. It's as easy as pumping in your little sort of text. You can tweet us at the bottom. I just had questions here. I would volunteer, ask you to do this. In the meantime, I'll repeat one of the questions that we were asked last week, which is a natural question. Is does it matter whether the Chief Innovation Officer was sort of promoted from within or recruited from without? Does it change the capacity to protect the species, be around here for the long term? I think our point of view on that is it's really so tied to the culture in the senior management team. Basically, the person who is promoted from within always has significant advantages, always has a way of knowing who the stakeholders are. And by the way, of course, innovation success and building it as a function is so often a function of negotiating the stakeholder interests and satisfying people. So I think the person inside often has that advantage that someone from the outside doesn't. On the flip side, depending on the condition of the company, sometimes an outside candidate can disrupt the culture and motivate change that someone from the inside no longer can or doesn't have the credibility to do it. So it's going to depend a lot on the company situation, more so than there being any one specific answer. Any other questions? Does some folks want to submit questions here and keep this dialogue going? Okay. I'm going to continue, and I'm going to urge you to please submit questions as you go along. So species longevity, I mean, what it really comes down to, and procreation being a metaphor for expanded budget, duration, larger team, larger scope of innovation activities. One of the things that our research and our experience has shown us is that those CINOs who relentlessly, tie their activities to measurable growth tend to be around longer than those CINOs and those departments who are doing great work, innovative work. It's cool, edgy work, and it's somehow operationally interesting, from an invention perspective interesting, but are not as monetizable quickly enough. So this is one of the real riddles of innovation is all of us talk about mid and long-term horizons, and rarely do executive teams and management teams put up with very long horizons. So you almost get into a situation where you have to somehow figure out how to balance, and I don't really like the term low-hanging fruit because often fruit ain't enough. It's low-hanging magic, low-hanging gems, but it's something low-hanging or short, sort of quickly that can be delivered versus the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3s. And I do have a few questions coming over here. These slides, by the way, Joe, the way we do all of this is everything is available by means of our YouTube channel, so you can see them on there. And maybe, Chris, you can comment otherwise if it's different. I have a question here. Into which CXO function should the CINO report? My thinking is ODHR. Put another way, which discipline best prepares a person to assume the role of the CINO? Terrific question. I'm going to go back and say, right to this value statement here, it depends on where the value is driven from. So at Best Buy, and maybe it's not a good example because they're having travails, but at any large retailer with a lot of people as their drivers, or maybe a restaurant chain, I would probably agree that ODHR is very crucial. But at a company that specializes in new products to establish its brand and its competitive edge, I might argue actually that that's the driver of value. I mean, the ultimate product officer of a company is the CEO, the ultimate product company. But maybe the innovation strength is going to have to come from the product side, and someone from that side would be appropriate. On a flip side, if you're at a company that's looking for brand new business models, someone with a very strong strategy background, business model background, as is true for some of our clients where they're the chief innovation officer, but they're almost a chief strategy officer with an innovation title because the company's looking to invent brand new models. And that's not so much human resource OD work or product work. It's a little different. Let's see here. There's a lot of beliefs. A lot of people are saying better to come from within. By the way, great question. In the ideal world, would the CINO not need to make herself or himself obsolete in making the organization durably innovative? This is one of those debates that I think can consume a whole lot of beers or wine in any bar discussion. And Imaginatik's point of view is this. The answer is there is a permanent role for an innovation leader, whether it's a chief innovation officer or a leader of disruptive, brand new products, new services, new models. There's a permanent new role because what happens to any capability that becomes ambient and part of the culture is it ends up being compromised or owned by execution. This is very important because anything that becomes sort of invisible becomes part of execution all over again, which focuses on quarterly performance, monthly, or maybe 1 year. So to protect Horizon 2 and 3, we're strong advocates, and it seems to be true of many of the market leaders. And of course, one of my hallmarks is I never use Google, Apple, or Facebook as an example, or Amazon. So I'm not going to talk about any of them. I think they're irrelevant to 98% of all the corporations on this planet because they started from a totally different place. But for most organizations, incremental innovation will, yes, be subsumed by operations, and then there still is a very key role for the CINO or the innovation leader to continue to support what's beyond incremental in the pipeline, and the new capability building and the new sort of keeping the organization on edge about adapting. Because again, organizations have an internal dynamic to sort of assume conservatancy, to assume risk aversion, and these are the things to be avoided to be a best-in-class company. I'm going to proceed here and maybe just answer 1 or 2 more questions, and then let's get on to our closing slide. One question, do you think the CINO always has to be a separate role? Is it not a role that can also be combined with CDO, CIO, CMO, as you were saying? Wow, this is a terrific question in my mind, and certainly I urge you to take a look at Innovation Alchemists when available in January. My view is that a pretty fundamental rethinking of what a CINO is, and I almost try to refer to more as an alchemist as opposed to an executive officer, is needed. And in fact, you might have an innovation committee and steering committee versus one person or one team. I think there's a lot of opportunity to rethink, totally rethink this point of view. Let's go on to some thoughts on what we think are the most essential steps, the most essential things to do to fortify the CINO species or the innovation function, to avoid the mining story, to avoid other stories at insurance companies, banking companies, and product and consumer companies. First off, and I think some of your comments already suggested, clearly there's got to be an imperative for innovation, and as often said but not always confirmed, innovation's got to be something that's going to be invested in. And we're going to talk about some of those sub-bullets in a moment. There's got to be, from the CINO and the innovation function, a real penchant for impact. To deliver impact, and impact isn't just economic. So, return on innovation isn't just cash. It is speed to market. It is agility. It is shortened cycles. It is patents. It's a whole lot of other measures of success other than just money. There must be discernible investment for a long enough period of time to prove results. And there must be significant institutional trust. Significant institutional trust that's going to permit executives to back new, slightly riskier strategies, but also to recruit the internal resources and the support to make innovation work. So again, just to kind of flesh out a little bit more the imperative, and I'll go around and kind of explain a little bit more of these comments. I think the imperative involves not only, and Chris mentioned it earlier, and some of your comments on the question side mentioned it earlier, not only CEO sponsorship, but also having a candid, honest understanding of where your organization is in its maturity. So on an innovation maturity roadmap basis, where are you really and what needs to be shored up to really attain goals set forth? The language is crucial. The language of innovation is different than the language of operations, and it will often not only help state what a growth strategy is, an innovation strategy, but also put a new understanding on the terms of risk and failure and experiment and what these things actually mean to commercialize versus simply continue to operate and put out adjacent and incremental products. Impact, I think not only is it visible, but one of the most important things we counsel our clients, and we would urge all of you to think about, is setting the metrics and indicators, the right ones up early on, is vital, because you're going to have to keep score. As a CINO, as a head of an innovation team, you must keep score, and it's not going to be as possible for you to assure either trust or investment or ongoing imperative without a scorecard that's evangelized in terms of the results and the progress being made. Investment, one way I like to think about it is a line of credit. It isn't just a one-time granting, but what is your evergreen line of credit to continue to not only have investments in technology and models, but in people? What does that look like, and how do you begin to educate your CFO, who, by the way, I list here as your very best friend, and notwithstanding reporting to the CEO or whoever you report to, the CFO is who's going to try to always make sure this is a prudent, reasonable investment for the corporation. And so you want to be on great terms with he or she and make sure this line of credit is assured, which is what helps you have the people and time and construct a proper portfolio for innovation for your institution. And finally, trust, the key word that most people really aren't very comfortable talking about, and most organizations don't always do a very good job of either creating or supporting. For institutional trust, you must understand early whether you came in from the inside or outside. You must have allies. There must be key business stakeholders, either units or functions, that really are looking for the magic and the results you bring, whereby you achieve alignment, and where you can get many of these people to join you in a common risk mindset. And lastly, one of the really successful steps, and this is probably change management 101, that we've seen great CINOs do, is to make sure that the wins are shared. They're very much shared for that business unit leader, for the function, so that there is a swelling of almost support from the ranks for ongoing CINO or innovation function investment. So in short order, species protection is not only possible, I think it's something you can proactively do. I see many of you online who are in these roles, and in fact, maybe you're doing all of these things, maybe not. We had no less than 4 organizations approach us last week to say, as I think about these things, I think I'm doing well in 1 or 2, but the reality is across 4 of them, I'm probably not doing well, and I'm going to have to balance out my scorecard and kind of where I spend my activities. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to ask you to submit any more questions. I'll answer a few of them. I see a few nice controversial ones here, so I have to totally answer those. I think one says, I'm not quite sure I understand it, from Joe, something about totally disagreeing when it comes to high-tech firms, R&D, and product and process development. so that all three are combined. I'm not quite sure. This might have related to who to report to. And again, I can say one of the ways we often answer in designing organizations for innovation, where should the CINO report to? There are academic answers, and then there's our blunt answer. Report to the power and the budget. You must report to whoever has an understanding of this horizon-based activity and is going to be supporting you. Classically, the CEO, but that's not always going to happen. It's going to be one tier down. And who is that? I think it's really important to line that up properly. Let's see here. Innovation is a mindset as well as a role. This role should ideally be part of each executive's position, hence the CINO may be making, yeah, again, I think one phrase I've seen commented is that every CINO should have an expiration date, you know, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years out, and I think there's some truth to that, with the exception that I do worry that many of the beyond 1 year horizon projects and products are not going to get operational attention, and it's almost the more successful the business is, the less likely it's the case. The less likely it's the case that there's going to be resource management attention or prioritization of those with the execution focus of a business. I'm going to try to answer one more. I think I don't see anything that's too distinctive. In many large companies, the Chief Innovation Officer is not a functional expert. Does this hold water, or is this another red flag? I'm not sure I understand that fully. I have to say, though, that I have not seen at all very common models of CINOs. In some cases, it depends on whether they're focused on culture, on brand new products, brand new models, if it is a unifying role across all disparate entities. I'm not quite sure there is any one style, and it's going to vary a little bit by the CEO's vision and the executive committee's vision. But in any event, I think this will become clear as we move forward. This will become much clearer as we move forward, I think, in the evolution of the innovation function. By the way, I do want to point your attention to a couple of sources, whether it's Innovation Excellence, whether it's Innovation Leaders by Scott Kersner. Increasingly, there's fantastic channels of information, not only clearly on the CINO and the role of the function, but all of these subjects about corporate management and corporate governance of innovation are becoming quite available to you. So I would encourage you to please make yourself sort of a student of this, because these are going to become even more important subjects. I leave you with this thought. My book coming out in January, Innovation Alchemist, What Every CEO Needs to Know to Hire the Right Chief Innovation Officer. In scouring the literature, I was able to find over the last 3 years a lot of information on what innovation is, how to be disruptive. Thank you, Clayton. How to devise models, information technology like we have in Imaginatik. But there was a gaping hole on leadership. It was actually quite a gaping hole on how should this function be managed. And in particular, how should a CEO go about picking a Chief Innovation Officer? I think is a pretty big hole. So I have 19 Chief Innovation Officers contributing essays. I think you'll greatly enjoy the frameworks. The frameworks for decision-making and distinctions between different types of CINOs. It's an ebook on Amazon, and you can learn more about it at innovationalchemist.com, which is a site that's up and running right now. We're a little bit earlier than a quarter of the hour before wrap-up time, and would very much enjoy, Chris, you to round out the conversation at this point and see if there's any other questions you want to pull out from here.
Thanks, Luis. I'm just taking a look through. Let's see. So an interesting question that just came in about, in terms of a responsibility or activity perspective, what do you think the surviving CINOs, the ones that do persist, will focus on? So what does a day in the life look like of the species that does survive?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I'd say there's, there's probably as many answers to this question as there are CINOs, but we see one surviving trait is that the CINO has been co-opted, has been, is viewed as a partner by the operating businesses and by some of the product areas as bringing new technology, new energy, and almost new channels or sources of inspiration to the business that otherwise would not be there. So they're not viewed as necessarily doing the work for everybody. They're viewed, though, almost as a source of content models and coordination or orchestration that otherwise wouldn't happen. Obviously, it's a very trust-rich role, and it's also one that takes substantial experience. One of the points of view I certainly stress in Innovation Alchemist is that this is a true Renaissance woman, Renaissance man job. It's not about being technically deep in just one area. It's being very capable across many areas, from design and operations, obviously, to technology and change.
That's very interesting. It actually leads into another question I've noticed here that is poking around. To what degree, in your view, over time, will the CINO need to be responsible for producing innovation or shepherding the process of innovation? And do you see those as distinct? And to the degree that you do, where does the balance lie?
You know, I think this role is a major coordination role. It is a Sherpa orchestration role, as opposed to producing innovation. I think the danger of coming in and setting oneself up either as the innovation source for the company. There's two risks that come with that. Is one, instant resistance from the organization who believes they've just been told they're not innovative, and number two, establishing a set of expectations that may be virtually impossible to fulfill. So I do think the orchestration part, in addition to being a source of mindset change for the organization, is very crucial. I think those are twin concepts. Because again, I just find, I mean, the reason we're retained by leading organizations is they have forgotten to be innovative. They may not even have a CINO. They no longer know how to be as innovative as they were when they got to where they are today. How does that happen? It all gets melded back into execution and delivering revenue and profits this month, this quarter. So I think that ongoing role is really rather important.
Okay. I actually don't see any more questions other than a couple of shout-outs for the appropriateness of the Sherpa the Sherpa role. That there's a couple of folks on the line that really do agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't see any new questions. Maybe this will be a final call for anyone else who has wanted to get in a question about all of this before we wrap it up.
We have a lot of good questions now. They're overlapping. There doesn't seem to be distinctive stuff. So in any event, Chris, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank all of you who attended, and we continue to be available via YouTube and our channel, and as Imaginatik to assist you in your innovation development. Chris, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Luis, for a great presentation. Thanks, everyone, for being a part of it today. Rest assured, the slides and the recording from this webinar will be forthcoming. Watch out for an email from Imaginatik on that front. And stay tuned for the Innovation Master Series in early 2014. We got a great lineup about to be rolled out. So I guess we'll see you all in the new year. Thanks again. Take care.